Good afternoon. I'm Mayor Fugel, and I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Pleasant Grove City Council work session this August the 6th, 2019, in our community room at 108 South, 100 East in Pleasant Grove. Welcome all the council here this evening. We're still missing one council person. I think she'll be arriving shortly. We welcome the staff that's here with us and also a few people in our audience this evening. So anyway, we'll start with our first discussion. Our city administrator, one of our favorite topics lately.
Well, this is one of them. Both items tonight have been kind of favorite topics lately. So, as you recall, in the last
No, I just got to
couple
stop you. I looked down and thought, Fourth Amendment. Wow, we've gotten, it's a fourth addendum.
Fourth addendum,
So, that was a Fourth Amendment. We were getting
I don't
big
even know what
time
the
here.
Fourth Amendment is. So. That's search and seizure? Okay. No, we don't want to mess with that.
No. All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So as we've been, the issue that has kind of brought this about is just the cost to recycle has driven up dramatically. We've been approached by Republic Services to have a consideration for this year, specifically this fiscal year, for us to help them with, because we have a contract. Our contract runs to June 30th of 2020. And in that contract, we have it settled how much we're going to do, how much we're going to pay for this service to them. Because the recycle market has, I think nobody really foresaw this, has really taken a turn in a not so good direction, particularly now for those that are under contract to deliver this particular service. They've asked us for some relief. So in conjunction with that relief, we've also started having discussions about amending our agreement and extending our agreement with Republic Services in regards to our solid waste. So we have the solid waste component and we have the recycle component. So I've asked Reese with Republic Services to give us a proposal. So this is the proposal that he has sent. So what I would like to do is to kind of go over, this is what they're proposing, and then allow Reese to answer any questions you might have about what they're proposing. And then I would recommend that you turn it back to me and the mayor, and then we will sit down and kind of negotiate the finer points of the agreement, and then have something back to you August 20th for approval so that we can do this. But kind of what I want is your opinions, thoughts on extending the agreement, and then also kind of how we're going to take on the Recycle Challenge. So what this says in a nutshell is that we would extend this agreement for 5 more years. So this would be both solid waste and the recyclables. As part of this agreement, let me take a step back. As I've researched a little bit, particularly with Ace Disposal, who is going to be doing a transfer station in our city here soon, I talked to them about what it would look like if they were to provide the curbside pickup for solid waste and recycle for our city. The response is they feel their rates can be competitive, with the exception of if they take on Pleasant Grove City, they now have to go out and buy 7,000 more cans, new cans. And so if they were to do that, they have to roll that into their price as to what they're going to charge us. And to their admittance, it would be more than if we just stuck with Republic Services, because Republic Services has already invested this money years ago and has those cans available. So for us as a city, if we were
Just a question. How much are 7,000? 7,000? Is that what you said?
roughly, do you know what the number is, Reese, on solid waste? I know recycles.
Yes, more than 7,000, I was just looking for it. Plus about 4,900 recycle cans.
Yeah.
And another 7,300 or something.
So
So they'd have to buy recycle cans
13,
and, well, because I guess I wasn't even taking into account those that have second cans.
73 and 35,
They could
11,
be-
11 grand, 11,000 cans.
Yeah, 11, 12,000 cans.
Reese, how much is 12,000 cans?
They're anywhere from
a piece. Got it. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so that's a price they would have to roll in and that we would essentially pay as a city as part of their bid. Now, if they wanted to bid and Ace would cover the cost of the cans, then we would probably have a competitive bid in that sort. Now, I haven't talked with Waste Management. They're the other company that does this locally. But I'm assuming Waste Management would be in the same boat, that they would have to buy the cans as well. So in my mind, if we are happy with the service we're receiving from Republic Services, then for us to extend this agreement would be okay without us going to bid. But that's really a decision that the city council can say, well, if we really want to go to bid, we got to get on it now, because we'd have to get the bid figured out, and then we have to give them time to buy their cans in order for them, if we chose another provider, for them to be up and running by July 1st of 2020. Right now, as I look at that, my recommendation would be that we stick with Republic Services and then we just negotiate the extension to something that we feel comfortable with as far as what these increases could be. So the first part of that is the recycle component, which we've talked about in the past, and what Republic Services is proposing is that starting September 1st, which would be here in just a few weeks, that our recycling containers, they would charge us an extra 80 cents per month per container. So right now, a recycle container is $5.90. That's what we charge our residents.
So that's a monthly charge.
That's what we charge. But Republic Services charges us $4.79, thank you. So the reason we charge a little bit more than what Republic charges us is we have the admin costs of administering the program and what have you. So I asked Denise to say, okay, if we were to do this, is there a way that we could absorb this cost for a year so that the city council would not have to raise the rate at least for this fiscal year? And she says we have enough in our reserve account to do that.
Okay.
So that's something for you to consider. Now, next year, when we look at our rates, we're going to need to increase it by at least 80 cents a can because we can't do this indefinitely. We just can't keep absorbing that cost. But if we wanted to get us through the rest of this year, we have that room to do that.
Okay, so Scott, let me ask you a question. So it's 80 cents per container per month?
Yes.
Okay.
And
And,
how many containers did you say?
40, recycle, we have 40.
4,900.
Yep.
okay. If individuals had a problem with that, they could opt out?
They could opt out, so this gets to number 3 in here.
Oh, okay.
So number 3 is if we fall below 4,750, then they will start charging an extra 10 cents per can for those that are still in the program. So we lose a little bit of our economies of
Economies
scale.
of scale there, sure.
And that's an unknown. We don't know how many people would drop it.
Right.
We could probably send out a survey if that was something that we wanted to know, hey, if your recycles, because the recycle is going to go up 80 cents at least if we choose to do that. And we'd recommend that just because our
Okay.
reserve accounts can't do that in perpetuity. We can handle that for 10 months, but we can't necessarily handle that for,
So I got one more question.
Yeah.
Let's say we wait for a year when our contract runs out, right? If we wait a year, wait for our contract to run out, it's going to be higher than the 80 cents. Plus, if we go to bid, we're going to have to pay $780,000 for cans or somehow put that in our dollar figure for cans
it won't be 780.
if we choose someone else.
Well, isn't it 78? Is it 780? So
Did I add a zero
$65.
on my
So 78,000.
No, I went 12,000 cans
Okay, 12,000.
times $65 a can is 780,
Okay, all right, so that's
right? So it's $780,000 if we went to Ace or if we went to someone else, that would have to be factored into the bid.
that would be factored into the monthly price.
Correct. So
And-
I guess I'm
keep
going to
going.
ask, can I ask Reese a question that he can't answer?
Well, but let me keep going just a little bit on that thought.
Do that all day long.
If we rebid the recycle, we can assume that whoever's going to come in and do this, what the tipping fees are
Sure.
now, that 80 cents is now going to be built into that Or maybe that's
Right.
where you were headed.
Well, what I was going to say was, I mean, the 80 cents is covering X percent of the,
$90 a ton?
yeah, X percent of the difference of what you're paying now, right? Are we meeting you in the middle with 80 cents? Are we covering all of it with the 80 cents? And where would we be in a year from now if we renegotiated? I'm hoping we can get a better deal right now to renegotiate.
Yeah, let me just tell you, we're meeting you in the middle. We're cutting our profits to meet you in the middle for a 5-year extension.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. If we wait a year, you think this is going to be bad?
So I'm, the number 4.
Well, yeah, so I'm
Oh,
not there yet.
okay. So, but looking through this, it looks good right now, but I don't think it should be on the backs of the resident for them to start paying a higher cost in September when our contract was through 2020, June 3rd.
No, but he just said we'd cover it.
We can cover that as a city.
I know, which
with our reserves.
which is still taxpayer money from the
Oh, sure,
reserves.
sure.
So we're still paying for private organization the loss, which, that's unfortunate, but why would we get out of a contract so signing another contract, are we gonna renegotiate and the taxpayers are gonna pay an increase? Like, I just don't understand why we signed the contract if now we're gonna start charging them more in September. Like, I'm okay with this and even moving forward if we can wait for the increase starting next June, because otherwise it's on the taxpayers, whether it's reserves or a monthly increase, it's still on the taxpayers.
Because we're mitigating the damage now
I just don't think that's our
over
responsibility
a
to
long
do that.
term.
What's our time frame? What, you talked about a time frame that we need to
Well,
get.
so they're requesting to start this September 1.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, it's kind of hard because sometimes we have to put some kind of marketing campaign or at least let the citizens know what's going on, right?
Well, so, again, it depends on how we're doing this, and let me address Sid's point.
Sure.
Because this really is the decision on how we're gonna handle this, because I look at this as, we're somewhat partners with those that provide this service. We don't have to use Republic. We can go somewhere else if we want to. The recycle thing was really an unforeseen deal. When this agreement was initially signed, I don't think anybody saw that the market was going to drop out. Now, do we as a city say, hey, we're under agreement and tough cookies, you got to eat that? We can say that. And I don't know, I think most cities, and maybe Reese can address this, most cities have come back and American Fork, we have a copy of their agreement. Orem has done the same. They are working with their service provider and meeting them in the middle.
But I thought you said
Help
with
mitigate
American
that.
Fork, they were now paying $40,000 extra a year for their recycling.
They're now, say that again?
It's now costing them $40,000 a year extra for their
Is that
recycling.
meeting halfway in the
Well,
middle,
it's
right?
gonna, yeah, well, they've already signed theirs. They did theirs back in March.
Well, I know, but what increase
They
are they now
agreed-
paying to meet in the middle?
What percent?
Well, not percent, but you said last time we met that it was like $40,000 more that they're paying as a city for the recycling.
They're paying 65 cents, but at the time, let me pull theirs up. So they did theirs March 12th. They're paying an extra 60 cents per container, but that was with $75 as the baseline. The cost now is $90 a ton for them to take the recycled services. And so they're asking us for 80 cents instead of 60, because American Fork says is for every dollar that it goes over $75, then it's a 1 cent increase. So according to this, American Fork would be at 75 cents.
And I think
Per container.
you said it was $40,000 a year extra.
I don't know I don't know their dollar amount. So if I quoted a dollar amount, I don't remember.
I think it was roughly around that. That's what the middle meant to them. I think what you said last time.
Yeah, I don't recall giving a dollar amount. I recall talking about the monthly rate.
You know, at this point, we don't, even though we're exchanging this for a longer term, we don't know what recycle rates are going to be in 4 years. You know, we may have to wheel and deal with Republic.
And that addresses it in this new contract.
Does it? Okay. I mean, it's,
Yeah, because we have the same deal, so.
Right,
For
right.
every $1 over 90, now American Fork's baseline is 75, ours is 90.
okay.
Okay, so if we wanted to go back to Republic and say, okay, we want the same deal as American Fork, drop us down to 75 cents instead of 80, Again, that's the negotiating I want the mayor and I to sit down and figure out over the next couple weeks.
So, yeah, what?
If the council in general is okay with what's here. If we're not okay with what's here, if our response is, we're gonna, tough cookies, you're just gonna eat it.
I know, but Scott, the way you're saying that, it's like really negative.
Okay, so,
Like, I'm not trying to say a tough cookies, like, this is too bad, but I'm trying to protect the taxpayer who we signed a contract with through 2020 instead of starting the increase in September. And so by signing this, I'm looking out for the taxpayer who that should be our first priority. And I don't want to say it in that way because that sounds really negative.
okay,
So
My feelings, Sid, is we are looking after the taxpayer. Because if we're at 80 cents right now, if we try to negotiate this contract in a year from now, that 80 cents could be $2,
Well,
could
but-
be $2.50.
But why can't we do a contract now, this same contract, but keep,
Because they don't know and we don't know what those recycling rates are going to be in 12
why would we sign it for
months.
5 years then if we don't know? Because we're going to be renegotiating this contract if we don't even know what it's going to be
No,
from year to year.
But we're negotiating an increase or a decrease, right? So we're willing,
Oh, it's below
we're willing to
90.
go up or down based upon those recycling rates.
so if
And what-
90 is our baseline and it drops down to 70, then we can drop ours.
So-
to
Drop our
30
rates.
cents.
So why is American Fork at 75 and we're at 90?
Because they play quicker.
When they negotiated theirs in March, it was $75 a ton.
That's our risk, right? If it's going up, buy quick, you know? That's my take.
So Reese is going to get up here in a minute, right?
What's that?
Some counties at $20, because they did it a year and 2 months ago.
Yeah.
That's their baseline, because that's what the rate was a year or two.
So I'm willing to enter into a long-term agreement if both of us are willing to bet on the increase.
So my question is, if I'm a betting man and I read all the articles throughout the nation, right, Reese? I just see where where recycling's going, right? It's not good. It's just not good. I mean, I just pulled up an article I was showing Todd today that San Francisco-based, what is it called, Replanet, just shut down like 274 of their redemption centers, recycling redemption centers. I mean, it's just not good. So I'm just trying to ask honest question. Do we really see this even turning around? I mean, it's hard to forecast, right? But it just does not look good for recycling. And so,
You know, something else we can put in here, if that would help you, Eric, is that we can put something in here that allows the city to discuss annually whether or not they want to continue to go with recycling within the 5-year
I like that.
contract.
Mm-hmm.
But then, we're going to have to figure out something on the MSW side to protect us. because
Sure.
We'll be losing all of that collection revenue that we're giving you a price for now.
I'm just afraid it may get to the point where you're going to start seeing cities just say, you know what, everything's going to go back to the landfill because it's just costing us too much. Or we keep getting our providers coming back and saying, listen, it's just getting outrageous now in the cost, right? It could be 2 years from now, and we come back and say, yeah, you did this contract, but it's just so outrageous now for you to even entertain recycling now, right? It could get to that point. I'm just saying
You
that
just want to opt out. You want to opt out.
some kind of opt-out that protects the city.
Well, but
And I
that's what-
understand on his side,
Which is fine, and that's kind of what number 3 is for in my mind.
yeah.
We might have residents that are willing to pay $20 a month because they believe in recycling that much.
Yeah.
And so that accounts for that service could happen. It's just that as we lose the economies of scale, for those individuals that stay in the program, that price is going to continue to go up. And I just call it the true cost to recycle. I mean, that's, in my mind, all it is if this is something that's really important to you, then yes, the service will still be there, will still provide it. It's just
Well,
going to be more
and I think
expensive.
that's what we're truly finding out around the whole nation, right?
Yeah.
What communities are really embracing it and taking hold and saying, we're willing to do it at whatever cost, and some are just saying, no.
And if we come back at 80 cents next year and people say that's too much, then they can opt out. And then, but.
Well, I'm just
if
saying
we
that
have-
there needs to be that breaking point, like we have listed here at 4750, that we as a city may just say, I guess we're done. I don't know.
Well, in my opinion, if, let's say it gets down to 4,000,
Yeah.
then the rate now goes up. Again, if there's 4,000 people that really want to recycle, the service will still be there. It will just cost more.
But I'm just saying, is that something that we just turn over to Republic, or do we still handle, are we still the
So
middleman?
we still provide the services, just the citizens have the option. We're not forcing them to recycle. Solid waste, they've got to pay it. They don't have a choice.
Well,
You know,
yeah.
they're going to pay for one can, whether they ever use the
Well,
can.
sure, yeah.
Or whatever. But recycle is not that way. The recycle is, if you don't want to do this, you can turn your can in tomorrow.
But then maybe it's a marketing campaign, because then all people are going to see is their costs increasing, not knowing where it's coming from, and it's going to come back to the city. And so I agree with Eric, if there's a way we can opt out completely instead of being locked in for 5 years, if it gets to a certain point where people are dropping.
Sure.
I just think that's something you can
Just need a
explore.
way
Again,
out.
Just explore
We're
it.
probably just
I mean,
kind of
I
saying
kind of
the
feel like
same.
it does need to be give and take. If we're going to increase the cost and break a contract that we did for the residents, and I mean, I guess we're meeting in the middle, but I don't know. I don't think we've ever done this for a business before.
I say explore it and
Okay,
come
well,
back.
I
and
mean,
let us
Reese has
know.
offered that we could have an out on the recycle. I'm just saying, if we have 3,000 residents that want to recycle and pay $12 a month, then I don't know why we wouldn't provide the service. If they're covering the cost of the service, then why would we as a city say, we're just taking that option away from you? But that's a decision that we would eventually make. But again, if Reese is saying, hey, no, we'll work with you, that if you just want to say no more recycling, regardless of what your residents are willing to pay or whether they want the service, yeah, we can.
Well, I think the numbers will bear that out, right? We'll find out. I don't know if we'll have a huge,
Well, that's just it, and that's kind of the unknown, is we don't know what that looks like. We don't know that if we add 80 cents next year, if we're going to have this widespread opt-out of recycle, or if we're going to have 30 people opt out,
okay, all right, I'm good.
so.
The
But
good, yeah, my vote, Mayor, is, you know, let's negotiate it, right? And see what we can do to ensure that we get good rates now and in the future.
Well, if it's all right with everybody, we'll move that direction and
Well,
we'll,
so let me cover point
Okay.
number 4 real quick. So this
Okay.
is the solid waste portion of this. So in the past, the increases were tied to the CPI. So if the CPI was 4%, then our cost would go up 4%. If the CPI was 1%, then the cost would go up 1%. So what they're proposing is that instead of tying it to the CPI, we just have a fixed increase at 3%. So
Annually?
annually. So the 3% feels a little high to me, and that's the stuff that I want to negotiate with them as we talk through that, or we can just keep it at the CPI, which, you know, might be a good way to go. But I just want to let you know, that's what their proposal is. So it,
CPI is the consumer.
Consumer Price
Product
Index.
Pricing
Based on the
index.
all items number, which
Okay.
isn't really a true, I mean, you should be basing garbage and trash based on eggs and milk and
Right.
clothing. But that's what the all items does. And before the garbage and trash index came about, everybody kind of used the CPI.
Got
Now
it.
there's the garbage and trash index on line 276 of the table.
Okay,
But the garbage and trash index has been upwards of 3.5% to 4%, and all items CPI has been about anywhere from 1.7 to 2.9. Now all items CPI is like 3.4, and garbage and trash is like 2.9. So to give you somewhere around the average, and you know what the budget's gonna be every year, it's 3%. I put it in there as a fixed rate. That's what a lot of the cities are doing, so they don't get this 1.7 to
Fluctuation.
1.6 fluctuations that they can't budget for.
just to pipe in here, a little bit.
speak into your mic just a little bit more.
All right. I think my only comment here is that I love being able to be in a situation where we can think of something long-term as opposed to short-term. And I think a negotiation would be protecting the ability for residents to afford recycling. I don't know what recycling is going to look like, but in the future, but I think that because this is not a mandatory service, this is something that they've chosen to either do or not do. I think that it will give us the idea of how many people in town want to pay for their recycling. So,
I could be wrong, but I don't think we've changed our recycle rate since we implemented in 2011.
No,
or
you
10.
haven't.
It's 590, I think.
It's 590.
So we're almost 8 years into this thing, 9 years into this, and we have not had a rate increase.
And so, and what you're saying, Scott, is that the city will eat the 80 cents for the next,
Out of the reserve account
Out of the reserve
for the
account
next 10
for
months.
the next 10 months, and then starting
July 1,
July 1,
2020.
it'll go up 80 cents.
Well, we would recommend as staff that we start covering that cost because we don't have enough reserves to do
Right.
this year after year after year.
What was
Okay.
that total again? The rate gonna eat for the 10 months, do we know?
So 80 cents a
80 cents a
can,
can, so
80 cents times,
4,800, 4,750.
I don't have my phone with me. 80 cents times,
probably, yeah, 5 grand.
Oh, that's right.
80 cents times 47.50 times 10.
And why I put July 2nd next year, I don't know, that should be July 1st on the contract.
Yeah,
Would we, just throwing it out there, would we be better off raising it, I don't know, 20 cents now and extending that dollar amount for a year and a half?
Good question.
Or,
what do you mean,
well, if we,
using, do 20
yeah,
cents,
if we're
but
like
then,
680, I mean, do we go to 7? Do we subsidize it for longer, right? Do we subsidize it? Well, that's really what we're doing. We're subsidizing it for the next 10 months.
Well-
Should we subsidize it for the next 18 months and raise the rates 20 cents?
well, but that's our call, so they're.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I'm asking you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
So if we do that, we just have to run the numbers on that, but generally, when we do our increases, we do like to tie it in with the beginning of the fiscal year. And so that would be a year and 10 months. If we wanted to do 20 cents starting October 1st or whatever to help take
I don't know.
care of some
Maybe
of
just
that.
look at- Maybe just look at those options as you negotiate.
We just thought the easiest way to manage it in some ways would be to absorb the cost in fund balance and then address the increase as we go through the budget cycle next year. So that we're not getting halfway through a budget cycle and having to turn around and increase
Yeah,
that
that makes
rate.
sense. Okay.
And that number may go down or up, depending on what the opt-out number is and what the commodity value
Yeah.
is. So
Yeah.
it could be down 10% by the time we get to July. It could be up 10 cents because as you do your marketing campaign, more than 200 people opted out.
So, yeah, all this does is really set out the methodology as we have the fluctuations in the market.
Would there be,
Sorry, go ahead. So really quick, so it's not 5,000 we're eating, it's almost 40,000
Times 10.
because, times 10.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he said that.
Oh, I thought you just said
Well,
5,000.
I didn't have the number, it was 80
Yeah,
cents
it was
times.
10. It was just a month. That was a monthly rate. For the whole 10 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. I think we got our march,
okay,
Scott.
so is the, council's gonna turn it back to me and the mayor to sit down with Reese and negotiate the finer points of the contract, we'll bring this back in 2 weeks.
if
Is
there
that-
was going to be any kind of a campaign to inform citizens? By the way, does this become an enterprise fund?
It is an enterprise fund,
It is?
it already is, yeah.
Okay.
So, and solid waste and recycle are in the same enterprise fund, they're not two separate funds.
Oh. Okay, that's interesting.
Well, I don't think our campaign is going to be for next year,
Right.
when we see what,
So
If
I'm
we
wondering
absorb
if
the
there would
cost
be-
in this year's budget, then I don't know if we need to do a campaign because the residents won't see a change in their
it's all
rate this
staying
year.
the same.
Okay.
But when we get to next year and we have to do it 80 cents, then yeah, we'll want to make sure people understand why. So I'm saying 80 cents now, it could be more, it could be
Depending on-
less. Again, as Reese is talking about, depending on the opt-outs, depending on,
Well, and I wonder if
These other
Republic
factors.
would go in with us on an informative.
oh, sure, and they
campaign.
have all the information. I mean, they already have this type of stuff that we can use to, I don't know how many people are clued in. If you read the newspaper, there's been plenty of articles talking about cities that are in the same boat and also just the recycling thing in general. But I realize not everybody absorbs that information and most probably don't know that this is kind of a nationwide issue and not necessarily just Pleasant Grove City.
Is there a reason why we have that being one enterprise fund? Why solid and recycle would be together?
I think that's how most cities do it.
Okay.
I don't. Yeah, I don't know why we would
Because
separate it.
this is a selected, this is a choice. This is not a mandatory solid waste removal.
But an enterprise fund is fees for service, and it is a service that
But
they're
this is a different
asking.
service than a solid waste. So I was just wondering,
Yeah, I just don't see
because
the
it's an option.
benefit of creating two separate enterprise funds. I don't see the benefit of doing that.
I'm pretty sure almost every city combines those. I
Okay.
don't know of,
Just like you have an option to have more than one can.
yes,
Okay.
Is there a reason why you want to separate it?
because we don't negotiate this the same.
That's true.
So with
Yeah,
all of
yeah,
your other
that's true.
line items, that is that's a contract with a single source.
well, to me, I don't know if the negotiation changes because the cost of service is what we charge and what we outlay for both the solid waste and the recycle. Now, the funds are commingled, but we can go back and look at how much we charge for recycle and the cost to deliver that service, and we can do the same with solid waste. So even though the funds are commingled, by line item, we can determine how that happens. That's why I would recommend we just keep them in the same fund, but
Solved.
if we needed to break it up, I mean, we can.
Okay,
Tell
we
that.
good?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our item number 2. And that would be time for Marty to get beat up.
Which one's this one? Okay, I'm not talking.
Filtering, filtering, filtering.
Every week, sometimes
Several days, every day.
3 times a
Every
week.
day, every day, every day.
I love the crustacean one.
Do those lights dim?
The muscles,
That's fine.
the quagga muscles.
Thanks, Reese.
All right. Thought it'd be good to start off this discussion with a little description about
Blueberry Farm.
our system, just so that everybody understands the unique. It's a little bit unique. It's probably similar to a lot of cities. So, in our system, we have a total of 6 pressure zones, starting from the high up on the bench, and as you get lower, those zones, as you can see, they start out pretty small. The blue zone there is our filter zone. You got a tank zone, our Battle Creek tank zone, an aqueduct zone, an upper main zone, and a main zone. But these are up on the bench, and so because of elevation, you have to put in pressure zones so that you can provide a reasonable pressure for service. Each one of these areas kind of have a unique source to them. Some of them are combined. For example, this filter zone right there has one source of water, and that is Battle Creek. There's no other ways, well, until last year, that was the only way to get water into there, was if we had enough water in Battle Creek, then we could feed that zone. If we didn't have enough water in Battle Creek, we would be really starving in that zone. With the Walker tank install, we put in a pump, so now we can get water from this yellow zone up into the filter zone. The second zone here is Battle Creek tank zone, and we can get water from Grove Creek and Battle Creek into that zone. And because of our project last year, we can now get water from the Provo River into that zone, like we can into the filter zone. So really four sources: Grove Creek, Battle Creek, Provo River, and the American Fork River are our main sources into our pressure irrigation system. Now, these are all surface water, so we can get some culinary water in there if we overflow the Battle Creek tanks and things like that, but these are all surface flows. And so it's dependent on the cleanliness of that is dependent on the runoff generally in a given year. Just really quickly, an example of that would be, let me pull this picture over. For the first time ever, we've got the new basins up at Battle Creek and Grove Creek. But on July 11th was the first time that we've ever discharged water into the Provo River Aqueduct from Battle Creek. Okay, we've had them in the ground since 2012, but the dams haven't allowed us, the way that those operate hasn't allowed us to really discharge very effectively into those sources, and we haven't needed to. This year's a different story. They've reconfigured those, and now we have to discharge into those, and so we did. If you look at that picture, that water falling over there is pretty clean water, right? That's the water coming from Battle Creek on July 11th. This is what it looks like on July 30th. This is water that's been through the debris basin and is coming out the other side. Because of the sediment load, what's happening in Battle Creek with all the high flows that we have there. The next week, it's actually looking a lot better. So this is on this is just Sunday night. And so you can see that it's a lot more clear here, the flow coming over that weir. And so every year, we've been taking samples every week for 6 years, 7 years now, on Battle Creek and Grove Creek because of our agreement with Salt Lake Metropolitan Water, okay? Because this water goes to them. Well, every July, we see a big, huge spike, right? Because we have water that comes out that's very sediment laden. It has a lot of water, a lot of sediments entrained in it. So we've had some issues, as everybody knows. You've all seen the emails over the last month, probably, of trying to deal with this sediment-laden water. How do you get the water out of it, right? Typically, this isn't a problem during normal flows because we have a couple of things happening here. Going back to this other map, at Battle Creek, so here we've got Battle Creek tank. Tanks and reservoirs serve as filters, right? You set all your sediment because you're just sitting there. All the sediment falls to the bottom of those, the tanks and the reservoirs. So they work really good as getting your sediments out. Sometimes you get floatables, but a lot of times you have a screen on there, so you're getting very minor influences from the floating stuff. Those tanks only work if there's not a lot of sediment. If there's a lot of sediment coming in, then a lot of that stays entrained because you're pushing it through and it's getting caught into that. And that's largely what happened over this last month, is that because of the high flows from Battle Creek that we were seeing, then we were seeing those flows go into the Battle Creek tank. Our filter stations were plugging up completely because of the high sediment load. We couldn't get them to filter out. They would filter for a few hours and then they would shut down. And so we would have problems keeping them running. And therefore, we were getting a different class or quality of water coming into the system because of that. This is the first year that we've been able to utilize those debris basins because they redid them this last year, and we have a different outlet structure now that we can actually utilize them for settling out some of this material. We learned that through this process, and we've never had to do that in the previous years. That changes how we are going to operate into the future. When we start seeing these peak flows, we can stop from bringing the water directly into the system in such a muddy state and so much sediment load, and be able to bring it through the basin, which is exactly what we did once we found out, hey, we're having some significant problems here. We now took all of the water through the debris basin rather than bringing it into the system, which has cleared up a lot of things. Because of the sediments that had gotten into the system, it took a little bit of time to work that out. We had to go and flush. In fact, we flushed every day for probably 10 days or so on all of our drains so that we could get this sediment that had come into the system out of the system, so that we could start serving the filter zone and the Battle Creek tank zone more efficiently. We feel like we're through that process. We feel like we've significantly increased the quality of water coming through there. The people, the residents that we have worked with have had good results. We haven't heard a lot of bad results other than maybe some residual sediments that are in the lines that are still working through. But we think moving forward, it should be working well. If you remember last year was a very low water year, and we had a lot of problems with sediments. But our main problem was coming out of the Alpine Aqueduct, because that water is coming directly from the Provo River, and with the low water year, we had a lot of moss growth, and a lot of that moss was coming through, and everybody's complaining about having all this moss growth. Well, the reason that's happening is because on our 3 turnouts out of the Alpine Aqueduct that come from the Provo River, there are no filters on those 3 turnouts. And so we've been, if you look in our 5-year plan, we plan beginning this year, there's $500,000 in the budget. We've planned and we started on the design of the 1100 North turnout here that will receive a filter on it. The next one would be here at 100 North at the Murdoch Canal, and then the other one's out here on the north end out by the pond. And those three over the next 3 years will receive a filtering station based on our planning right now in order to get those filtered.
Marty, question.
Yes.
In my little head with my sprinkling system and my little filter, what does a filtration system look like? Just really quickly, just tell me.
A citywide filtration system?
Like
So these things are,
at 1100 North.
what is a 500,000 compared to a $100
Yes.
filter? That's a big jump, right? So these are self-cleaning. They're automated. They're I would say for the most part, you're probably looking at having 3 or 4 foot in diameter, 5 or 6 foot tall type
Screens.
filter screens, and they automatically flush based on a pressure differential across the screens.
Wow.
So they're pretty intense. We currently have 2 filters coming out of Battle Creek and Grove Creek on a much smaller scale. So those filter maybe 2 or 3 second feet of water versus we're going to have about twice or 3 times that big to filter the stuff off of the Alpine Aqueduct because it's a higher flow rates.
Okay.
So big filters. Most of them will be inside the vaults of Central Utah Water, and they actually manage them, but we have to pay to install them. And a number of other cities already have filters that operate that way. So for that really affects the yellow zone, the pink zone, and the brown zone, because mainly the yellow and pink all receive their water from the Alpine Aqueduct. We can get water from Battle Creek down in there, but it's going to serve higher first before it ever gets there. So it usually doesn't make it that far down. And so the pink and the yellow is what would be greatly benefited from having that. The brown zone is fed by the Manila Creek Pond. So because that's such a large body of water, the water coming out of American Fork River mainly feeds that. We get some from the Provo as well. But it's fairly clean water. Once it's settled out, it usually is pretty clean. On my house, I'll admit, I don't even have a filter on my system. I haven't had one since I moved in 2 years ago. Haven't had a problem. I wouldn't say go do that. What I'm saying is that it depends on where you're at on how successful you're going to be of not having one or having one. Now, I would say we have other problems in zones because water's coming from different sources. We've found recently that in this zone here, we've got a couple of residents that have snails coming through their filter systems. And you've maybe seen a picture or two on the internet. And I've given that to a water quality guy, and he's doing some evaluation of what type of snails, where they may be coming from. They're fairly small in nature. We don't believe they're the quagga mussel right now. We don't. We've got him evaluating those to where they may proliferate in the system and cause further problems of decreasing pipe sizes and things that you hear about on all the time. But
So Marty, I got a question.
we are evaluating that.
So, this zone right here is where I live,
Yes.
and I believe it's where you live. And some of my neighbors have had those mussels, those shells. It's probably shells is probably a better word. But I also do not have a filter on my secondary water, and I haven't had any problems. You don't have a filter? But I'm concerned that if we get a proliferation of shells, I will have a problem, and you'll have a problem. And so if we just need to get some, I think that's probably the biggest problem. Moss, I understand. Dirt, I understand. I've got big heads that push that dirt through. But if I had small heads, I probably wouldn't. I'd probably be more concerned. But we got to do something that's the residents don't have to clean their filters out every time they water.
And there's the few, and it's kind of different depending on where they're at, where that water is being pushed. I think it depends on how fast it's moving. So some people might receive a lot more based on there's more water going that direction, where we may be in an area that doesn't have as high of flows, so therefore the water's not taking the shells there. We will look at that, and we're trying to look at the water quality. the thing here is not a filter problem, it's a Snell problem. The thing up here is a filter problem, it's a sediment problem. And so every zone has its own little unique issue to deal with. The problem in these two zones isn't necessarily sediment load, it's moss growth potentially in floatables versus sediment load in those. And so we have a little bit different approach on how we're gonna, the types of filters and how fine we have to filter that. A lot of the sediments drop out in these two zones just because it's coming from the Provo River through a 10 million gallon tank into our system. There's a lot of things in every one of these systems. And so as we look at this, one of the things that we could talk about, we've had the issue off and on again in the aqueduct, in the water coming from the Provo River. And that's why we put in the next 3 years to put in this filter system. And the question is how fast do we want to get that taken care of? We could choose to bond or find some money elsewhere and try to do that and get all of those in this year and try to help that area out a little bit better. I think the problems that we're having up here aren't necessarily, we could put a filter on the Walker, on the Battle Creek tank. That would be the only thing that we would evaluate to see if that's something that would help that area. But I think our understanding now of how the new debris basins work, how we can get water through there, and then also how our filters are working where we need to pump when we have high water, high sediments loads and the filters aren't working, that we can probably work with our upper zone with what it has. This purple zone is one that we could consider doing a filter on. Again, these two zones are all fed by the other aqueducts that we're already working towards, and then this one will be working towards a solution on what's causing this or what's allowing this and what we're going to need to do. I am not sure what the solution is yet on the Snells and things, but we are evaluating that. So I guess the question would come as to, I know that we've talked about, hey, let's get this problem resolved, and the real problem is right now the aqueduct, the Battle Creek. Again, the Battle Creek tank would be another thing that we would like to address by getting some better inlet structures coming down Battle Creek and Grove Creek and getting a lot more of those sediments to be able to flow over the screen, and the material that comes down there during our high flows, get that taken care of. And so I guess any questions or direction or
Well, can I talk about the financing part of this? So with what Marty's saying is in our 3-year projected budget, 500 this year, 500 next year, 500 the year after. So $1.5 million committed to solving this problem, but that will take 3 years before that's fully implemented. Is the council willing for us to explore options, maybe a loan from the state or potentially a bond for us to get that money up front, get this all fixed for next year? Would it be fixed? Would we have enough time to get it all fixed by next year?
We could do those three. I'm not sure about the Battle Creek tank, but we could definitely do the other.
So roughly borrowing in the neighborhood of $1.5 to $2 million, but we would do a 4-year bond or a 5-year bond, not a 20-year bond, because we were already planning on setting aside this money. So really, well, for this year, we've allocated,
Not for this year, but in the future.
yes, in our plan.
We have a revenue.
Yeah. Yeah, so we would have to, we'd pay some interest, obviously, if we're going to get the money up front. But by shortening the term on the bond to 5 years instead of 20, then in essence, we're all paid off after 5 years and we have our filters in. So we would like to explore that as staff, if you're willing for us to at least
Yep,
see what that looks like to you,
totally. in
to say,
favor, 'cause
okay, here's what it's going to,
I live on
or it costs us.
the zone that's been having Marty knows. It's multiple a day, and they're not even changing their filters once or twice a week. It's once or twice a day. Some aren't even getting water because it's so clogged. And that's a lot of time. This is a first world problem. There's, but there's people who live on that bench area that literally are not getting water, and they have to go monitor their system, so their plants and
Weren't,
shrubs and
but are now. So if you know of anybody that's not getting water, that's not.
You're talking
Because of the
today.
filter.
She's talking.
She's talking because of the filter.
Yeah, but you're talking last week.
a
few days.
But the problem is this is happening every single year, because last year it was no water. This year it's too much water. It's all over the place. And if we can do something to minimize what's happening up there, because is just, and it's years, like, they've been dealing with this. So I'm in favor if we can do a short-term bond like that and get them in other zones in the area who are having major problems some relief. Because, I mean, this is a good 3 or 4, sometimes 5 months out of the year that they have that secondary water issue. And it's a lot of time and it's frustrating, and I can understand their frustration. And so if we can bond and get that money, get this problem taken care of, I'm in favor of that. I think a low-interest, short-term bond would be worth our time and investment to help clear up those issues up there.
Full support.
I'd say go
Full support.
research, yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Does any of this, is any of this water that we're talking about with this bonding, is any of this water the same water that goes into the Salt Lake, the aqueduct?
Yes,
So they want clean water.
they do.
Would
But-
they be in, do they care enough to co-bond with us?
Probably not.
No.
So
They don't
that's the
even,
thing.
It's not their problem.
well, they don't want our water to start with.
Yeah, so our agreement with them, we already have a contract that says we will only send them water that's as clean as what's in Provo River. And they didn't want our water to begin with, so it was an accommodation to us to even allow our water to come.
It's a great thought.
Like you're thinking.
Let's not bring that one up. Well,
My bad.
That would be a
well,
no.
and also understand that to filter, the filter that we have is the debris basin, right?
Right.
That is the filter that we have before it goes to the Provo River aqueduct. And so to filter out the amount of water that we're talking about there might cost a couple $1 million alone to just do Battle Creek. So if we're trying to filter the water that goes to the Provo River at the amount of flows that we're sending it, it's a much bigger concept because we got to deal with a larger stream flow. Whereas for us, we can deal with the individual sources and make them smaller and more manageable. So.
Okay.
So maybe the next step is we get some numbers on an interest rate, just how much we need in general. And then you're saying we get the funding and then what? Like how soon for next season, could this
So
be in
we've already
place?
started on the first one because it's already in our budget. We already started that process. So these are all fairly similar. They're just in different location and different vault sizes. So that one would be easy to just kind of move forward on that design. That's why I'm saying I can get them done this year so that it'll be operational for
In
next
place
season.
for next, okay.
If we can
Okay.
get the funding. And I've got $500,000 in that budget to start on the design, so we should be fine that way. The question would be on the Battle Creek one. That's the one that's going to be a little bit tricky. I feel like that we've got a much better, because we've learned a lot over this last month, we've got a better process in how we can get clean water into the system. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be much, much cleaner, and we shouldn't have the issues of shutdowns and every time you water type of things with the filters clogging and things like that. If you hear of anybody, let me know. I'm happy to go meet with them because we've done a ton of work over the last 2 weeks to try to get that whole system cleaned up. And I feel like we should be succeeding at that based on the water that's coming in now
Okay,
and doing that. So
okay.
Any other questions for Marty?
Just get her done, bud.
Thanks for helping. Thanks for helping.
Excuse
It's a big issue right now in the city, so let's
yes,
get it
and
fixed.
I wish it wasn't because it is. I mean, I could be in their shoes. You know, every time I
take
talk
one.
with one of these residents, like,
Yeah.
okay, if it was me, I don't blame you for being a little upset that it's doing this. But at the same time, you know, we have a little bit. I mean, we're doing all we can with what we've got. We just probably need to have a little bit more to be able to make that function a little bit better and provide a little bit higher level of service on that. So.
Green grass is expensive.
Can I say one more thing? So there are different levels of filtering, and some people expect us to filter at a drip system level, and some expect us to filter at a water like your just your sprinkler level, right? So a 300 micron is kind of where they recommend for irrigation systems, but they recommend 100 microns, so 3 times smaller, to do a drip system. So even though we get to that 300 level with our systems, just be aware that people still, if they want to do drip systems and things, they're going to have to do another layer of filtering. Some people have filters that are filtering the 100 micron for their whole system, and they're very, very small and very cheap systems. They're just made for drip irrigation, and so they clog really fast. Probably 95% of our calls that we receive are due to a clogged filter because of one, usually too small, or the screen size on them are very small. So the more open screen you can get, obviously, the better, the more surface area. So we have that problem. Just know that that might still be a problem in the future because people sometimes buy a filter that's a little bit too small, and it's really difficult to get. We can't filter that size. We'd spend millions of dollars to try to filter that low with the amount of flow that we have to do. So just be
And,
aware of that.
You know, this would be a very nice informative infographic as to a very simple, here's the zones, this is what we're doing, this, you know, I would love to get information out on, you know, filtration, remind people. I've talked to people, honestly, that have never cleaned theirs out, and they don't know where it is, and they don't know how to find it. So I'm just wondering if there's something that we could do to get information out. I know Sid had Mike Green do a cute
YouTube
little
video, yeah.
YouTube video that was so well done, and people were shocked. They had never cleaned it before. So I'm wondering if we could actually facilitate some information about where their water comes from. I also know there's people that don't know where our water comes from. So,
I would say most of the city doesn't know
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, most people don't know a lot of things, I guess, is how the sausage is made, but,
they wouldn't eat it.
well, what I would think,
that. Don't drink your secondary water.
well, we're talking two separate things. One, I'd like for us to kind of get it figured out if we're gonna actually borrow money to do this, and then we can maybe have a campaign to the citizens to say, here's what we're doing to help mitigate some of the, because even with the filters, it's not like all the problems are gonna go away.
Can't believe you guys don't have filters.
But, well, I mean, yeah, we do, but not to the level of what we could be doing.
So
talking
I'm
to
saying,
me and Todd.
I'm saying.
Oh,
Todd
on their
and-
personal
I bought it
systems,
that
yeah.
way, and I've just never changed it. I probably would have put one in had I did the system myself, but I haven't had to, and I haven't had a problem. But I wouldn't recommend that for you.
I'm in the
It just
flatlands.
depends
We
on where
we
you're
clean
at.
ours twice, we're
Yeah.
twice a week.
I have big rain birds. And,
They pass the water.
yeah, I just don't want shells in it. So whatever that 300 micron, let's make sure that shells
pretty fine
can't get through those.
Other than my drip
Yeah.
lines, and I have to change those
Yeah,
clean those filters.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, thank you, Marty.
let's do it.
Scott, before we break, let's go over tonight's agenda.
We want to go real quick?
Tell us what's good and what's not.
Okay, I'll just do it from here.
Okay.
Our first item, 9A, is a public hearing regarding a potential reception center in the Grove Zone, and there's some requirements, a conditional use that comes with that. The applicant has requested that a couple of those conditions not be part of the process anymore. And Daniel will go into more detail in regards to what that ask is and what the recommendation of the Planning Commission is. 9B, and this is something that we'll also address when we adopt or when we approve our agenda in our meeting. And that is that we did have somebody that wanted to change the transportation master plan to accommodate a development. They have pulled their application because there were a couple other issues with the development outside of the transportation part of it. And we just found this out Friday, I believe, is when they decided to pull this. So notices were sent out. There's people that could be coming to talk about this issue. So we'll be upfront at the beginning of the meeting saying this item's been pulled. We will not be having a public hearing. In fact, if the developer is going to do this a different way, this item will not come back in front of you because there's potentially a way they can do this without having to amend city code or change the transportation
So is there a
master
way to
plan.
notify those residents again or not? No.
Well, those that come to the meeting, we'll let them know today.
I mean, like before that, so they don't plan on coming
Well, so
in.
we won't, if that happens, there will not be another notice. The notice they got is that we're having a meeting on
Right.
it today.
That's what I mean, but can we send another notice that says it's no longer going to be a public hearing?
Well, it's too late, but
Okay.
what our plan was is to suggest that the mayor let them know that it will not be on the agenda, but if they'd
Okay.
like to speak, they could take their 3 minutes in open session.
Okay,
And if it's okay, I'll cover that part when we do that, so that we can kind of walk people through it. Because even though this is not going to be in front of you likely, again, the developer might come back with a different proposal, that we might have to run through some of this again, I don't know. But, and that's why it's going to be hard for us to comment on this project now that they've pulled their application. We don't exactly know exactly what it's going to look like. But if people want to comment in the open session on their thoughts and feelings regarding this project, then we don't necessarily have answers, but we'll give them the opportunity to share, and then we'll try to help the best we can as staff to let them know where that is in the process. Item A is our yearly lease agreement that we do when we switch out a portion of our police vehicles, our computers, and our fitness equipment. We have on a 3 or 4 year rotation, a 3-year rotation. So this is the standard lease agreement that we do. Item 9B is something that will be postponed to another date. And because it's not a public hearing, we won't have a date certain on it, but 10B.
10B.
10B. 10C is just a subdivision plat. We have a person that owns some buildings in our community. Somebody else wants to buy some of these buildings from them, so they have to subdivide them and have their own plat so they can buy those particular buildings. And then 10D is the resolution that a couple other cities have passed in regarding the county form of government. The county created a good governance advisory board, and that board came up with 6 recommendations. We'll go over what those recommendations are. You might be aware just some of the issues that surrounded them actually trying to put it on the ballot, them trying to determine what they were going to do with this. But some cities have said, hey, we recommend that you follow the recommendations of your good governance board, and that's what this resolution says. But I'll go a little bit more in detail in that when we present the item. So that's our agenda for tonight.
Okay. With that, unless something else to bring, I ask for a motion to adjourn from our work session.
So moved.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are not